All right, hello there, thrill seekers. How do you teach Zen? I'm not sure I'm the best one to ask, but I'll try to answer it anyway after 15 seconds of We're an American Band by Grand Funk. Alright, that was a little bit of We're an American Band by Grand Funk. My dad wasn't into rock and roll very much, even though he was exactly the right age to be a rock and roll kind of guy. But that was one of the very few rock albums he ever bought and was around in our house, and I always liked it. And the fit for today is my Hello Kitty, 4th of July Hello Kitty thing that I bought. Anyway, it's a little late for 4th of July, but that's all the 4th of July stuff I'll do. Somebody asked me, how can you celebrate America? And I was going, I just answered, I love America, but that's a bad answer. One thing that's great about America is it is really the only place where Zen is flourishing right now. I guess it's coming up in Europe, but it's pretty dead in Japan and Korea and definitely dead in China and India. So America is where it has happened. So there's one reason to celebrate America. All right, I got a question. And since before your sun burned hot in space and before your race was born, I have awaited a question. And the question was from a guy who has just been asked by his Zen teacher to teach Zen. And he wanted some pointers. And I'm going to give you the sort of meat of the question. Here's the main part of the question. Looking back on your time since Nishijima Roshi asked you to teach, what do you wish you had known going into it? What would you have done differently if you could? Any other comments would be welcome too. I don't know if I gave him a good answer. I probably gave him an answer that scared him off from the very idea of teaching Zen because, I've had some difficulty. But let's start off with a little bit of traditional Zen. I am scratching my foot in case you wondered what that was about. And one interesting thing that comes up about teaching Zen appears in, this is a new translation of the Blue Cliff Record by Matthew Jackson Sullivan, which was sent to me by Monkfish, the publishers who published my and Nishijima Roshi's translation of Muhammad Yamaka Karika, the Fundamental Wisdom of the Middle Way. And they sent me this, and it's a real good translation. This same bit, if you don't want to buy that one, or if you don't have that one and you want to look at something, it appears in two Zen classics, and it also appears in the Zen teaching of Huang Po. And it is the 11th koan in the Blue Cliff Record, Hekigan Roku. And it goes like this. Huang Po taught the assembly, "You people are a bunch of dreg-swilling bozos." See why I like this translation? "Traveling around on pilgrimage, where are you today? Don't you know there isn't a single teacher in the Tang realm?" Tang would be basically China. A monk came forward and asked, "Then what about the people in various places who help disciples and guide assemblies?" Huang Po said, "I didn't say there is no Zen. I said there are no Zen teachers." Which is kind of a weird thing to say because, as the monk pointed out to Huang Po, there are people who seem to be Zen teachers, so what's the deal with that? And I'll give you my answer. And the answer I think most people kind of default to when making commentaries on this particular koan is that you can't teach Zen. It's unteachable. It's just you can't teach it in the form of giving people lessons on it and, I don't know, giving them a quiz at the end of it and that kind of stuff. I mean, you could teach sort of a kind of dumb memorization of Zen philosophy that way, but Zen itself can't be taught that way. And as I said to the guy who wrote me this question, I feel like I've been kind of a failure as a Zen teacher. I don't know that I have done a very good job. I kind of consider what I'm doing on this YouTube channel to be a little bit different It's not exactly Zen teaching. It's making YouTube videos about Zen. So that's a whole different thing. It's not the same as being a teacher. Being a teacher to me is kind of an in-person, one-on-one sort of thing, or one on, 7 or 8. You rarely get a lot of people. I said at the beginning that Zen is flourishing in America compared to other places in the world, especially the places that gave birth to it, like China, Japan, and Korea, and India. But you still only get, I don't know, big places like San Francisco Zen Center can pull in 30 or 40 people for a lecture on Zen. People like me, I get like 10 people or so. That's normal for me. So, you don't get a lot of people, but it is alive here, which is a good thing. But a lot of people are doing their best to try to kill it. Let's leave that for another time. But the only way I have been able to do this job of being a Zen teacher when I've done it has been to take the attitude that I am going to sit Zazen every day anyway. This is what I've done since, 1983 or something like that when I first started, maybe 1984, I'm not exactly sure. One of those years in the early 80s when I first started. Since then, I've been doing Zazen every day, every morning and every night. In the early days of my Zazen experience, I didn't do it quite as regularly as I do it now. But, since at least the middle of the 1980s, I've been doing it pretty much every day. So since I'm going to do it every day anyway, I first formulated this idea when I lived at a place called the Hill Street Center, which was in Santa Monica, and it was the first place that I really tried to teach Zen independently. Nishijima Roshi, when I was in Japan, had sort of tasked me to lead some retreats, and he put me in charge of doing the lectures for about the final year or so, I think, that I lived in Japan. I was doing the lectures instead of him because he said, I'm old and tired, and it was just an excuse, I think, really to get me started on this thing. But teaching it independently without anybody to look over my shoulder or to ask questions about, like Nishijima Roshi was there right in Tokyo where I lived. Didn't have that anymore. I was in Hill Street Center. I lived at the place, and I taught. I had a Zen group that I taught in scare quotes I think it was on Tuesdays at first, then we moved it to Saturdays. And so I was sitting Zazen at the Hill Street Center because it's where I lived every day, and my attitude was, I am going to sit Zazen every day. Here it is, Saturday morning, and you guys, I'm opening the doors and welcoming anybody who wants to come and join me in practice. You're joining me in practice. I'm not teaching you how to practice. Now, I would do a little bit of basic instructions, which is the same basic instructions that I'm sure are 100 places on YouTube right now, if you want to go look them up, which is just how to sit. You can read Fukan Zazengi by Dogen, which tells you basically everything you need to know in about 2 pages about how to sit Zazen. And my book, Hardcore Zen, I put Zazen instructions in the back of that. I think I put them... I put some form of Zazen instruction in every book that I've published. I think the most complete set of instructions is in Hardcore Zen, but the other books also have it. And the new book that I'm working on, which will probably be called Zen and the Art of Japanese Monster Movies, because we don't want to use the word Godzilla in the title, aka Zen of Godzilla, that also has instructions on how to do Zazen at the end. I hope they don't cut it out. The publishers are kind of getting on me for making the book too long. But anyway, so I give people the basic instructions. You basically just sit still, you keep your eyes open, you stare at the wall, you keep your back straight, you keep your chin in line with your navel, your nose in line with your, what is it? I forget. Anyway, and basically you just sit still. Sit down and shut up was the title of my second book, and that's basic Zen instructions. I give those instructions. We all sit together for either 1 round or 2 rounds of Zazen, and then I will just say a few things. What I'm trying to do is stimulate a conversation. So I'm not really trying to give a lecture. I'm just saying things that I think might stimulate people to ask me questions, give them kind of permission to ask questions in the form of me, talking. And so we hope we start a conversation. And that's it. That's the only way that's ever worked for me. When I used to go out and prepare lectures, those lectures always felt flat. The first thing I tried was writing out a whole lecture and kind of delivering it, and that felt very canned. And then I tried to write it out and memorize it and then deliver it, but my memory is crap, so that didn't work. And it still felt canned. So whenever I'm asked to do a lecture on Zen, my goal is always to just stimulate conversations and get questions, because that's the only way I've known to do it. To me, teaching Zen works best on a kind of apprenticeship model, which is to say, like, my wife was into pottery and she actually took pottery lessons, but I think one of the ways one learns pottery is to find somebody who makes pots that you like and find out who it is and say, can I come and watch you and help you maybe clean off your pottery wheel or whatever. It's the way I learned guitar. I had a few guitar lessons very early on, but I gave them up after, 4 or 5 months, I guess. It wasn't very long. And then what I did was I made friends with a guy named Dave Chamberlain, who was and still is an excellent guitar player. And he had a band, and I would roadie for the band. I would carry he had a big giant Marshall stack amplifier, 6 feet tall. And, I would help him move that and move the other equipment. And I would run the lights. Sometimes they had a little light board that they like to use for their shows. And the whole doing all of that was just an excuse that I could sit as close as possible while they were playing and just watch what Dave did. So I'd watch what he played on guitar, and I'd often go back home, and because it would be late at night, I'd play an unplugged guitar so I didn't wake up my parents or my sister, and try to remember what I saw Dave do. The one that I never could get was the intro to Spirit of the Radio by Rush. I used to really stare at him doing that one. I'm like, I never could figure that one out. But I figured out a lot of things. And it was just by watching and being with a guy who did it already and who was better at it than I was. And that's really the only kind of model that works. People, when I used to try to run a Zen center, which was also a big failure, people would say things to me like, you need to give people a path to Jukai. And Jukai is the ceremony where a person officially becomes a monk. Hi, Editor Brad here. Jukai doesn't usually mean becoming a monk. Actually, Nishijima Roshi considered it to be like that, but most people think of it as a ceremony where you are agreeing to live your life according to the Buddhist precepts. And I said become a monk because I was in a hurry to get through the point. Okay, now back to the regular video. And my first teacher never did that until actually very recently he started doing that, and actually he asked me how to do it because he never had done it before. So I gave him some lessons I'd learned from Nishijima Roshi. Nishijima Roshi did Jukai a lot, but I've always felt weird about doing Jukai. It makes me feel kind of icky, so I never really liked doing that. And people would say you need to be more prescriptive. That was a criticism I got, and I was like, "What the hell do you mean prescriptive?" And the person who said this wasn't able to explain herself very well what she meant by prescriptive. I guess like a prescription, like a doctor writes you a prescription. Like I've gotten a lot of prescriptions in the past year for the condition that I'm undergoing, and and you take that and you're gonna get better or whatever. You're gonna stop having headaches or whatever you're getting the prescription for. I don't think Zen is, I don't think it's a good idea to teach Zen that way. So I'm not prescriptive at all. I just feel like the only way is that sort of apprenticeship model that I just kind of went over. You sit with the person who sits and you're sitting together. So your teacher if she or he is any good, isn't really trying to teach you anything. They're just allowing you to enter in, and together you're going to find this thing. I don't consider myself to be like the person with all the knowledge. I just have a lot of experience, I suppose, in doing this. And that does count for something. I got 40 some years of experience doing Zazen myself and talking with teachers and dealing with that kind of stuff and doing all of that. But I got nothing to teach you. I got no lessons. The lessons are just us trying to figure it out together. And I guess I have a certain greater responsibility because I am the guy right here on the hot seat. But I often found teaching Zen to be kind of annoying because the people who would come, most of them, I have to say, were nice, sincere people who really wanted to do this practice together. And most of the people that I encountered when teaching understood what the deal was. They understood this model of we're just doing it together, because I said it a lot. But I'd always get people, and I think these people are common, they want something. They want affirmation. They want a pat on the back. They sometimes are looking into, they're doing Zen as a career move, I think. They're hoping to get, this is why I felt icky about doing Jukai. Because a lot of people would misunderstand Jukai and go, oh, wow, now I'm a priest and now I'm going to go out and teach. And Brad Warner gave me Jukai, and I don't want people running around saying I made them teachers like that, because that's not what's happening in Jukai. So I kind of worried that because I'm sort of famous, this can be an issue where it's not as much of an issue for other people, I suppose. So there's people that want something, and there's people who are like trying to climb a ladder, and there's people who are kind of challenging me, trying to prove that they're more enlightened than I am. It's like a dick measuring contest. Only the dick measuring contest, at least you can pull out a ruler and find out whose dick is bigger. But in the case of who's more enlightened, it's stupid. It's who can convince the crowd they're more enlightened than the other. That's what those kind of contests become. And I got a lot of that, to the point where when I saw some of these scandals, when I was first just a student of Zen and not trying to teach it, and I would see some Zen teacher get in a scandal, I'd be like everybody else, like, no, you naughty guy, you're doing bad things. And now that I've taught Zen for a while, now let me say this carefully. I'm not trying to excuse some of the really bad behavior we've seen from some Zen teachers. I'm not going to name names. But when I see Zen teachers engaging in some of that really bad behavior, I kind of understand, because they probably put up with even more of the kind of BS that I've had to put up with as a teacher, and they're just kind of sick of it, and it comes out in this very unhealthy way of almost trying to take revenge on the students by taking advantage of them and stuff like that. And I'm not saying it's okay, and I do agree that it's a bad thing to do, so please stop writing your comment right now that you're going to say that I think it's a good thing or whatever. But I understand it. I understand it. And I would, as to you folks who are maybe working with a teacher, be nice. Don't be a jackass to your teacher. I've had so many people who are just complete jerks to me that it just really annoys me sometimes. And I find the whole enterprise, every time I have to take on the mantle of being a teacher, I'm like, oh God, like I say, most students are fine, but there's going to be somebody who shows up, and it's going to be one of these people who's got problems. One a great example of a Zen student who had problems happened at the Tassajara recently, the Zen monastery up in Northern California, where one of these problem students who showed up, who was mentally ill, decided to burn down their Zendo because of, I don't know, probably some fantasy this person had that the Zen teachers were, I don't know, not doing what they were supposed to do or whatever, so they, decided to burn the Zendo down. So that's an extreme example, but you get a lot of that. There's always somebody who's off their rocker who shows up eventually to every Zen group. I think this is just part of the game. I don't know, part of how it goes. But anyway, just sorry for that little side rant. But the main thing I want to say is when Huang Po says there are no teachers of Zen, I think that's what he means. I think that what he means is that there's nothing really to teach. It's just we engage in this practice together, and because of the natural sort of differences between individuals, there will usually emerge somebody who is going to be the leader of the group. But he's the leader, he or she is the leader of the group the same way, I don't know, Michael Nesmith was the leader of the Monkees, or John Lennon was the leader of the Beatles. It's not really, John Lennon wasn't really the leader of the Beatles. He was just sort of the person who was most comfortable speaking for them, and that sort of emerged, and that sort of looks like a leader. But in reality, all of the Beatles were working together to produce the music that they were producing. Actually, this is actually a pretty good analogy that I thought of right here on the fly. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to be sort of the Beatles and produce some music together, but we've got John Lennon, not to compare myself to John Lennon really, but you've got the John Lennon figure who sort of acts as the spokesperson for the group and kind of sets the direction for it, because somebody's got to do it, and usually the most experienced person is the best person to do it. But it doesn't mean they're teaching you anything. So yeah, how do you teach Zen? You don't. That's the answer. That's the quick answer. All right. If you want to contribute to me not teaching Zen on the internet, you can go to the URL that you're about to see on the screen below, or you're about to hear if you're listening to the audio version, and that is hardcorezen.info/donate. Again, hardcorezen.info/donate. That is where you will find links to my PayPal and Patreon accounts. Those are my only way of making a living right now, and I appreciate your support, but you don't have to support me if you don't want to support me. And I had a meeting with an oncologist yesterday, and the news was not exactly what I wanted to hear, but it was pretty much good news, and I may be very close to the end of this thing, and God willing it doesn't come back again, and we're going to do what we can to make sure it doesn't come back again, or to hopefully make sure it doesn't come back again. And so yeah, I might be truly on the mend at this point, rather than getting any sicker. So that's good news. And I'm going to leave you with some video of Ziggy up in, a friend of mine has a cabin up in Big Bear, and we went, my wife and I and Ziggy went up there this weekend to get away from the 4th of July fireworks, which always freaks Ziggy out. And Ziggy had a great time there, and I'm going to show you some video of that. All right, we will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Bye. You see this?